Nobody saw it coming. No announcements. No posts. No long explanations. One day he was just there. Winning. Not the kind of winning that feels like a lucky break either. This looked different. It looked calm. It looked inevitable. Like he'd been walking toward this moment for a long time and simply arrived, without needing to prove anything. People kept asking the same question again and again, like the answer might change depending on who said it. Where did this come from? They asked it in group chats. They asked it in comments. They asked it with surprise in their voice, like the world had skipped a chapter. What they didn't see were the quiet nights, the unnoticed effort, the discipline practiced in silence. They didn't see him sitting alone at a small desk, long after the rest of the city had gone quiet. They didn't see the cheap lamp casting a circle of light onto his notes. They didn't see him reading the same page twice because his eyes were tired, then reading it again anyway. They didn't see him closing the laptop, taking a breath, and reopening it because he promised himself he would finish. They didn't see the small moments that build a life. The truth is, real success rarely makes noise on the way up. It arrives loud, but it is built quiet. And this is the lesson most people learn too late. The more you talk about your plans, the weaker they become. 2. The old version of him. His name was Zane. Not famous. Not rich. Not special in any dramatic way. Just a regular guy with regular problems and an unusually strong desire to change his life. For years, Zane did what most people do when they're tired of being stuck. He talked. He talked about the business he wanted to start. He talked about the skill he wanted to learn. He talked about the money he wanted to make. He talked about the person he wanted to become. And it felt good. It felt like progress. Because the moment you say your goals out loud, people react. They nod. They smile. They say things like, "That's amazing," or "You got this," and your chest fills with a warm confidence that feels like accomplishment. But it's not. It's comfort. And comfort is the most dangerous thing when you need change. Zane didn't realize it at first. He just knew he loved the feeling of being seen, being supported, being applauded, even if the applause was for a version of him that didn't exist yet. Then time would pass. A week. 2. A month. And the goal stayed the same, but Zane didn't move. Not because he was lazy. Because he was human. Because life is heavy. Because motivation doesn't show up on schedule. And every time he didn't follow through, something inside him cracked a little. Not loud cracks. Quiet ones. The kind that you only notice later. The kind that turn confidence into shame. 3. The night he got tired of himself. The shift didn't happen in a big moment. No dramatic breakdown. No movie-style speech. No lightning bolt of inspiration. It happened on an ordinary night. Zane was on his phone, scrolling through someone's success story. A guy he knew from school had posted a photo. New office, new car, smiling like the world finally respected him. People were commenting heart emojis and "proud of you" and "inspiring." Zane stared at the post longer than he wanted to admit. Then he did the thing he always did when his chest felt tight. He opened his notes app and wrote a new plan. A new schedule. A new routine. A new version of himself. He even typed the first sentence like a promise. Starting tomorrow? But then he stopped. His thumb hovered above the screen. And for the first time he asked himself a question that hit like a punch. How many times have I said this? He didn't count. He didn't need to. He could feel the number in his body. A quiet embarrassment rose up, slow and heavy. Not because he wanted to be perfect. Because he was tired of lying to himself in small ways. That night he didn't make a new plan. He made a new rule. And the rule was simple. I'm not telling anyone anything until it's real. He didn't say it like a motivational quote. He said it like a man who was finally done performing. For the first week of silence. Silence sounds peaceful from the outside. From the inside it can feel brutal. The first week, Zane felt restless. He wanted to tell someone he was changing. He wanted someone to say, "I'm proud of you." He wanted that early validation that makes the beginning feel easier. But he didn't. Instead, he woke up earlier than usual. Not by 2 hours. Not in some heroic way. Just 30 minutes. Enough to create space. He made tea. Sat in the quiet. Opened his laptop. And he started. He chose one skill. Learning how to build and sell a simple service online. No grand startup founder fantasy. No "watch me become a millionaire" energy. Just a skill. Just practice. He watched tutorials slowly, pausing when he didn't understand. He took notes. He tried, failed, tried again. He wanted to post about it. He wanted to announce that he was finally doing something. But then he remembered something else. Talking is easy. Work is the proof. So he stayed quiet. 5. The strange power of not being seen. A month passed. Nobody noticed. And that was the point. Zane went to work like normal. He laughed at jokes. He answered messages. He showed up at family dinners. He looked the same from the outside. But at night he was different. He was building. Some nights he felt unstoppable. Other nights he stared at his screen like it was a wall and he had no tools to climb it. There were nights he wanted to quit. Especially when things didn't come fast. Especially when he made mistakes that reminded him he was a beginner. But something strange happened in the silence. He stopped performing. He stopped comparing. He stopped negotiating with himself in public. When nobody knows what you're doing, you're free. Free to be messy. Free to be slow. Free to be a beginner without shame. Zane realized something. When you announce your goals, you invite eyes. And when eyes are watching, you start protecting your image instead of building your future. Silence removed the pressure to look impressive. And in that quiet he finally started improving. 6. The temptation to explain. Around the 6th week, someone asked him casually, "So what have you been up to?" It was a normal question. A friendly one. But Zane felt something inside him rise, almost like a reflex. The urge to finally speak. To finally show people he wasn't wasting time anymore. He almost said it. He almost gave the whole story. But he paused. Because he knew what would happen next. They'd ask questions. They'd give advice. They'd compare him to someone else. They'd poke holes in his plan. Even if they meant well, it would pull him out of his focus. So he smiled and said, "Just working on a few things." That was it. And it felt strange, but powerful. Because for once, he didn't need anyone to clap for the seed. He just needed to water it. 7. Quiet nights, loud doubts. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was the doubt that showed up when nobody was watching. Doubt is loud in an empty room. There were nights Zane stared at the ceiling and felt the old fear creep in. What if I'm wasting my time? What if I'm not smart enough? What if nothing changes? And in those moments he understood why people talk. Talking is a way to borrow confidence from other people. When someone says, "You can do it," it temporarily quiets the doubt. But Zane was learning a different kind of strength. The kind where you don't borrow belief. You build it. Oh. By showing up again. Even when you don't feel like it. Even when progress is invisible. Even when you're tired. Every quiet night he worked, he was doing something deeper than building a skill. He was building self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of every real win. 8. The first small win nobody knew about. One day he landed his first client. Not a huge one. Not life-changing money. Just enough to prove something. He stared at the email for a long time. Then he leaned back in his chair and smiled, slowly. It wasn't a loud smile. It was relief. It was the feeling of, "I'm not crazy." He wanted to tell someone immediately. He wanted to post it. He wanted the world to witness the moment. But he didn't. He celebrated quietly. He went for a walk. Bought himself a simple meal. Sat alone and let the moment sink into his bones. And while other people might not understand this, Zane did. If you talk too early, you turn a small win into a performance. But if you stay quiet, the win becomes fuel. So he went home and got back to work. 9. The day people finally noticed. Months passed. Not one dramatic leap, just steady growth. Zane got better. Faster. Sharper. He improved his process. He stopped making beginner mistakes. He learned how to handle clients, how to price, how to deliver quality without burning out. And slowly the results began showing in his life. He looked calmer. He moved differently. He said no more. He carried himself like someone who didn't need approval. Then it happened. A coworker saw him leave early one day and asked, "Where are you going?" Zane answered casually, "I have a client call." The coworker laughed. "A client call? For what?" Zane paused. He could have explained. He could have given the whole story. Instead he said something simple. "I've been working on something for a while." That coworker's face changed. "Wait, since when?" Zane shrugged, not arrogantly. Just calmly. "A few months." And just like that, the energy shifted. Because people don't respect plans. They respect results. And results speak louder than any announcement ever could. 10. The silent lesson. Nobody saw it coming. No announcements. No posts. No long explanations. One day he was just there. Winning. People asked the same question. Where did this come from? And Zane finally understood the answer. It came from the quiet nights. The unnoticed effort. The discipline practiced in silence. Because real success rarely makes noise on the way up. It arrives loud, but it is built quiet. And this is the lesson most people learn too late. The more you talk about your plans, the weaker they become. Not because talking is evil. Because talking leaks energy. Because every time you explain your vision to someone who hasn't earned access to it, you hand them a piece of your focus. And focus is fragile. Zayn didn't win because he was secretly gifted. He won because he protected his energy. He moved in silence. And when it was time, he didn't need to explain anything. His life explained it for him. And that's the real flex. Not telling people what you're going to do, but letting them find out when it's already done. Most people don't share their plans because they're confident. They share them because they're insecure. That may sound harsh at first, but sit with it for a moment. Think about how often you've heard someone announce a goal before taking the first real step. Not after progress. Not after results. But right at the beginning, when the idea is still fragile, untested, and uncertain. They talk about what they're going to do. What they're about to start. What they plan to become. And they say it out loud because saying it feels good. Talking creates a false feeling of progress. The moment the words leave your mouth, your brain reacts as if something meaningful has already happened. You've declared intent. You've made it real, at least verbally. And the mind doesn't always distinguish between spoken intention and actual effort. Validation feels like achievement. Approval feels like momentum. You tell someone your goal and they smile. That's amazing. I believe in you. You're going to crush it. Their words are warm, encouraging, supportive. And in that moment, something subtle happens inside you. Your shoulders relax. Your breathing slows. The tension you felt before, the pressure to do something, starts to fade. Your brain releases a quiet sense of relief. For a moment, you feel accomplished. But nothing has actually been done. No work completed. No discipline applied. No resistance faced. Just words exchanged in a comfortable conversation. This is how many dreams slowly lose their edge. They don't fail dramatically. They don't collapse all at once. They fade. They dissolve into conversations, into plans discussed repeatedly but never acted on. Each time the goal is shared, it feels lighter, less urgent. The emotional reward arrives early before the effort is required. And once the reward is received, the drive weakens. Silence, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. Silence doesn't clap for you. It doesn't say, "Good job." It doesn't reassure you that everything will work out. Silence just sits there, watches you. And silence demands work. When no one knows what you're planning, there's nowhere to hide. No one to impress. No one to reassure you when doubt creeps in. The only thing left is action, or the honest awareness that you're not acting. That's why silence feels heavy. In silence, there's no performance. No audience. No applause. Just you, your intention, and the quiet pressure to prove it through effort. Most people would rather talk than act. Talking is safe. Talking is easy. Talking lets you feel productive without being vulnerable. Because action is exposure. Action means failing where people can see. Action means struggling in private without praise. Action means facing resistance, boredom, fear, and uncertainty alone. So people talk. They talk about the business they're going to start, the body they're going to build, the book they're going to write, the life they're going to change. They talk because talking creates identity without responsibility. If you say you're becoming something, you get to feel like that person, without paying the cost yet. You get the label before the labor. And the brain accepts that trade far too easily. But confidence doesn't announce itself. Confidence moves quietly. The truly confident person doesn't feel the need to explain their plans because they trust themselves enough to work in silence. They don't need external validation to keep going. Their motivation isn't fueled by praise, it's anchored in commitment. They understand something most people never learn. Results speak louder than intentions ever will. When someone is deeply focused on building something, they're often unavailable. Not emotionally distant, but mentally occupied. Their energy is directed inward toward consistency, discipline, and repetition. They don't have time to explain. They don't want to interrupt the process. They protect their focus. Because focus is fragile. Every time you talk about a goal prematurely, you invite opinions, doubt, advice, expectations. Even well-meaning encouragement can distract you from the work itself. Silence protects the work. It keeps the goal raw, untouched, unpolluted. There's a certain strength in keeping your plans private, not out of secrecy but out of respect for the process. It's a quiet agreement you make with yourself. I'll speak when there's something to show. This doesn't mean isolation. It means intentional restraint. It means choosing discipline over dopamine. Because validation is addictive. Once you experience the emotional reward of being praised for an idea, it becomes harder to sit down and do the unglamorous work. The work feels smaller compared to the high you already received. Why struggle when you already feel successful? That's the trap. The mind craves completion, not effort. And talking tricks the mind into believing something has been completed, even when nothing has started. Silence doesn't offer that illusion. Silence keeps the pressure alive. In silence, every day becomes a quiet question. Did you move forward today or not? There's no one else to answer to. No one else to impress. Just honesty. And honesty can be uncomfortable. Because in silence, excuses sound hollow. Promises feel heavier. Time feels louder. You can't distract yourself with words. You can't perform ambition. You have to earn it. That's why silence builds strength. It trains you to rely on discipline instead of motivation. To show up even when no one is watching. To work without applause. To keep going when there's no immediate reward. This is where real confidence forms. Not from encouragement. Not from belief. But from proof. Proof that you showed up when it was hard. Proof that you acted when it would have been easier to talk. Proof that you didn't need permission to begin. And when results finally arrive, they feel different. They feel solid. Because they weren't spoken into existence. They were built quietly, piece by piece. At that point, you don't need to explain your plans. People can see them. And when people ask, "How did you do it?" the answer is rarely exciting. I stopped talking. I kept going. I worked when no one was watching. That's the part most people don't want to hear. They want motivation, not discipline. Validation, not responsibility. Conversation, not commitment. But growth doesn't respond to words. It responds to action. So if you feel the urge to announce your next move, pause. Sit with the discomfort. Let the silence press against you. Ask yourself a simple question. Am I sharing this because I'm ready to work? Or because I want reassurance? If it's reassurance, stay quiet. Let silence do its job. Because silence doesn't lie to you. It doesn't reward you early. It doesn't pretend progress exists where it doesn't. Silence demands proof. And when you finally break that silence, not with promises but with results, the words carry weight. Not because you spoke them, but because you earned them. Every time you explain your plans, something happens internally. Not on the outside. Not in the room. Not even in the other person's face, though you might notice it there too. Internally. It's like a small shift inside your chest. Like you've opened a door that didn't need to be opened yet. You've invited the world into something that was still forming in you. Still delicate. Still warm. Still new. And the moment it leaves your mouth, it's not just yours anymore. You invite opinions. You invite doubt. You invite comparison. You invite this unnecessary pressure that sits on your shoulders like a weight you didn't even realize you were placing there. It happens so quietly you might not notice it at first. But if you've ever shared a plan you cared about, really cared about, you know exactly what I mean. The moment you say it out loud, it usually starts innocently. You're excited. Your heart feels full. You've been thinking about it late at night, imagining the future like a private movie only you can see. You can feel the change coming. You can feel it in the way you walk, in the way you look at your life. So you tell someone. Maybe it's a friend because you trust them. Maybe it's family because you want them to be proud. Maybe it's someone at work because you're tired of carrying it alone. And for a second, just a second, it feels good. You feel seen. You feel brave. You feel like making it real with words will somehow make it real in life. But then they respond. Not always with cruelty. Not always with negativity. Sometimes they smile and say, "That's cool," and then immediately add, "But are you sure?" Sometimes they don't even mean harm. Sometimes they're trying to protect you. Sometimes they're speaking from their own experience. But still, something happens inside you. The plan that was glowing in your mind suddenly feels exposed. Like you've put a tiny flame out in the wind. Opinions arrive first. Opinions arrive quickly. They arrive dressed up as advice. They sound casual, even caring. You should do it this way. Have you thought about the risks? That industry is hard. People don't really make money doing that. I know someone who tried and it didn't work. And you nod because you don't want to seem naive. You don't want to seem like you can't handle reality. You don't want to seem like you're just dreaming. But inside, your mind starts splitting. One part of you still believes. The other part of you starts arguing with itself. And you can feel the excitement draining, not all at once, but in small drops. Because now your plan isn't just a plan. It's a debate. Doubt slips in quietly. Doubt doesn't usually kick the door down. It slips in. It sneaks in through the little cracks created by other people's reactions. You start replaying their tone in your head. Not just their words, their tone. The hesitation. The raised eyebrow. The half smile that didn't reach their eyes. And suddenly you're lying in bed thinking, what if they're right? What if I'm overestimating myself? What if I'm about to embarrass myself? What if I fail and everyone remembers that I said I would do it? That's the pressure part. The part nobody warns you about. Because when you tell someone, you don't just share a plan. You create an audience. And now your brain starts performing for that audience even when they're not there. Now it's not just about building something. It's about proving something. Comparison starts its work. Comparison shows up next. It's like your mind starts scanning the world for proof that you're either capable or not capable. You see someone else doing something similar and suddenly you feel small. Or you see someone else doing something bigger and suddenly you feel behind. You start measuring your beginning against someone else's middle. Your private dream against someone else's highlight reel. And it changes the way you move. Instead of steady progress, you get this restless energy. Instead of quiet focus, you get this constant question. Am I doing enough? Am I good enough? Am I too late? And the plan that used to feel personal starts feeling like a competition. A race you didn't even sign up for. The pressure you didn't need. Then comes the pressure. The heavy, unnecessary kind. Because now people ask you about it. How's that thing you were talking about? And maybe they mean well. Maybe they're trying to encourage you. Maybe they're just making conversation. But even that question can feel like a spotlight. And if you haven't made progress yet, or if the progress is slow, messy, private, you feel exposed again. So you start forcing things. You start rushing decisions just so you have something to report. You start doing things for the sake of showing progress, not because it's the right step. And when you don't meet the timeline you never even promised, you feel guilt. You feel like you disappointed someone, even though they weren't the ones carrying the dream. You were. The hard truth about people. Here's the part most people don't want to say out loud. Some people won't believe in you. Not because you're incapable, but because believing in you would require them to face something in themselves. It would require them to admit that maybe they could have tried too. That maybe they could have taken the risk. That maybe they could have chosen differently. So instead of dealing with that uncomfortable reflection, they dismiss your ambition. Or they downplay it. Or they act like it's unrealistic. Some will project their fears onto you. They'll hand you their anxiety like it's wisdom. They'll tell you all the ways it could go wrong because that's how they survive, by imagining danger before it arrives. And again, it's not always evil. Sometimes it's love mixed with fear. Sometimes it's trauma disguised as advice. But it still lands on you. And if you're not careful, you start carrying their fear like it belongs to you. When someone secretly hopes you fail. And then, there's the quiet one. The one people rarely talk about because it feels too harsh. Some will secretly hope you fail. Not openly. Not loudly. They won't announce it. They might even smile at you. They might even say, good luck. But deep down, they feel something uncomfortable when you talk about growth. Because your ambition reflects what they avoided. Your courage highlights their comfort zone. Your willingness to risk makes their safety feel smaller. And if you succeed, it forces them to confront the story they've been telling themselves for years. I can't. It's too late. It's not for people like me. It's not realistic. Your success threatens that story. So without even realizing it, some people pull for you to stay the same. Because if you stay the same, they don't have to question anything. And again, not because they're evil. Because they're human. Because it's hard to watch someone do what you were too afraid to do. The cost of talking too soon. This is why explaining your plans too early can be expensive. Not financially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Because when a plan is still young, it needs protection. It needs space. It needs quiet. It needs room to be imperfect without judgment. It needs time to grow roots before it has to face wind. But when you tell too many people too soon, it's like planting a seed and then digging it up every day to show everyone, look, it's growing. Seeds don't grow like that. They grow in the dark. They grow in silence. They grow when nobody's watching. Silence protects your energy. Silence protects your energy. Not because you're hiding. Not because you're afraid. But because you understand something most people learn the hard way. Your energy is limited. Your focus is fragile. Your belief in yourself is something you have to guard, especially in the beginning. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is a boundary. It's you choosing not to give your unfinished dream to someone who can't hold it gently. It's you refusing to turn your personal growth into public entertainment. It's you saying quietly, I don't need applause right now. I need progress. Plans grow stronger untouched. Plans grow stronger when they are untouched. When they are allowed to be messy. When you can make mistakes without having to explain them. When you can change direction without feeling embarrassed. Because plans evolve. You might start with one idea and discover something better. You might think you want one path and realize it doesn't fit you. But if you've already announced it to everyone, changing feels like failure. So you stay stuck, trying to follow a plan you've outgrown, just to avoid the feeling of looking inconsistent. Silence gives you freedom. Freedom to adjust. Freedom to learn. Freedom to become. The quiet way to build. There's a certain kind of peace that comes from moving quietly. You wake up and you work. You make small progress that nobody claps for. You build in private. You let your results speak later. And something beautiful happens when you do that. Your confidence becomes real. Not because you talked about what you're going to do, but because you've been doing it. And that confidence is different. It's not fragile. It doesn't collapse the moment someone questions you. Because it's built on evidence. Proof. Hours. Effort. Discipline. And when people finally notice, they don't get to vote on whether you should have done it. They only get to witness that you did. A different kind of strength. This doesn't mean you never share anything. It doesn't mean you isolate yourself or carry everything alone. It means you choose wisely. You share with people who have earned access to your dreams. People who don't just hear your ambition, they protect it. People who don't turn your goals into a debate. People who don't hand you fear and call it realism. People who can listen without needing to shrink you. Because the right support feels different. It doesn't drain you. It fuels you. It makes you feel steady, not shaky. But until you find those people, or if you're not sure who they are yet, silence is safer. The ending no one sees coming. Most people think talking about a plan makes it stronger. Sometimes it does. But often it makes it weaker. Because you confuse words with work. You get a little emotional reward just for speaking, and your brain starts treating that as progress. You feel productive before you've built anything. And then when it's time to do the hard part, the quiet part, the part where nobody is cheering, you're tired. You've already spent energy on explaining instead of building. That's why the most powerful move is often the simplest. Say less. Do more. Let the plan live inside you long enough to become real. Because every time you explain your plans, something happens internally. You invite opinions. You invite doubt. You invite comparison. You invite unnecessary pressure. Some people won't believe in you. Some will project their fears onto you. Some will secretly hope you fail. Not because they're evil, but because your ambition reflects what they avoided. Silence protects your energy. Plans grow stronger when they are untouched. Silence looks like fear. Until you understand what it really is. People mistake silence for fear. It happens all the time. You can feel it in the way someone tilts their head when you don't respond right away. You can hear it in the tone that follows, like they're trying to pull words out of you. So, what are you thinking? Are you okay? Why aren't you saying anything? And sometimes it's not even that direct. Sometimes it's the quiet assumptions. The little stories people build when you don't give them one. He's nervous. She doesn't know what to say. They're not confident. They're backing down. But that's the thing about silence. It gives people space. And if you don't fill that space, they fill it for you. The truth is, silence isn't always fear. In reality, silence is control. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that needs attention. The kind that stays calm under pressure. The kind that doesn't panic when the room gets uncomfortable. The kind that doesn't rush to prove itself. Silence is the ability to stay steady when every part of you wants to speak. And that takes strength. The old version of you would have explained everything. There's a version of you, maybe the older you, who couldn't stand being misunderstood. Someone would question you even slightly and you'd feel it like a poke under your ribs. Your heart would speed up. Your mind would race ahead. You'd start explaining. Not because you wanted to talk, but because you wanted to fix the feeling. You wanted to correct the story before it spread. You wanted to protect your image. You wanted to prove you weren't wrong, weren't weak, weren't uncertain. So you would give the details. The backstory. The reasons. The intentions. The let me clarify. The what I meant was. Sometimes you'd walk away from a conversation with a dry throat and a tight chest, thinking, why did I say all that? Because deep down you were trying to control how people saw you. And the irony is, that kind of control is fragile. It depends on other people understanding you. It depends on other people agreeing. It depends on other people being fair. And people aren't always fair. So eventually you learn something painful but freeing. You can't control every misunderstanding. But you can control yourself. The moment you stop performing. There's usually a moment that changes it. A moment when you realize that explaining doesn't always help. Sometimes it makes things worse. Maybe you're in a conversation where someone has already decided who you are. Their eyes aren't curious, they're locked. Their mind isn't open, it's settled. You can feel it, and you keep talking anyway. You give them clarity. You offer context. You try to be reasonable. You stay calm even when they aren't. You lay your truth out like a clean shirt on a table. And they still don't take it. They twist it. They dismiss it. They use your words like weapons. They take your honesty and turn it into a weakness. That's the moment you realize, not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone deserves your explanation. Not everyone deserves your energy. And something in you shifts. You stop performing for approval. You start moving with purpose. When you don't explain yourself, something powerful happens. When you don't explain yourself, you stay flexible. That's the first thing people don't understand. Because when you announce every plan, every intention, every next step, you lock yourself in. You create a public contract. Now you have to follow through the way you said you would, even if you learn something new. Even if conditions change. Even if a better opportunity appears. And if you pivot, if you adjust, people call it inconsistency. They call it indecision. But it isn't. It's intelligence. It's adaptation. Silence gives you room to grow without defending every change. It gives you the ability to move differently tomorrow than you move today without needing permission. You stay flexible. When you don't explain yourself, you move faster. Because explaining is slow. Explaining invites debate. Debate invites opinions. Opinions invite noise. Noise invites delay. You've seen it. A simple decision turns into a long conversation. A clear move gets buried under what if, and are you sure, and maybe we should wait. And sometimes it's not even about what's best. Sometimes people just want to feel included. Sometimes they want control. Sometimes they want to test you. If you're constantly explaining, you start moving at the speed of other people's comfort. Silence breaks that. Silence lets your actions lead. You move faster. And when you don't explain yourself, you think clearer. Because words can trap you. The moment you say something out loud, it hardens. It becomes a statement you have to defend, even if it was only half-formed in your mind. Silence keeps your thoughts alive. It keeps them fluid long enough to mature. In silence, you can ask better questions. What do I actually want? What's the real goal here? Am I reacting or choosing? Is this decision about fear or about growth? Silence is where clarity sharpens. Not in the middle of proving yourself. Not in the middle of being judged. In quiet, you think clearer. The pressure to show your hand. People love a preview. They want to know what you're doing. They want your plans. They want your timeline. They want your next move. Sometimes it's innocent, curiosity, excitement, support. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's control in disguise. They ask because they want to measure you. They want to compare. They want to feel ahead of you. They want to know where you stand so they can position themselves. And if you're not careful, you start giving away your future in pieces. You start talking about what you're going to do before you've done it. You start giving people access to something they didn't earn. And you do it because you think you owe them clarity. But you don't. You don't owe the world a preview of your future. That sentence hits different when you've been burned. When you've shared a dream too early and watched someone mock it. When you've told someone a plan and felt their doubt infect you. When you've announced a move and then failed and had to carry not just the failure, but the audience. Silence protects your momentum. It keeps your energy yours. The strongest players don't reveal their next move. Watch the strongest players in any arena, business, sports, politics, life. They don't talk like they're trying to convince you. They don't reveal what's coming. They don't announce a shift before the shift happens. They don't give you a roadmap. They let the results speak. Not because they're secretive. Not because they're scared. But because they understand timing. They know that attention is a currency. And if you show your hand too early, people start interfering. They start trying to influence it. They start trying to copy it. They start trying to block it. They start trying to claim credit for it. Silence removes all of that. Silence keeps the field clean. Silence isn't hiding. Silence is positioning. This is the part most people miss. Silence is not hiding. Hiding is fear-based. Hiding is shrinking. Hiding is avoiding. Silence is different. Silence is positioning. It's the calm space before a decision. It's the pause before a move. It's the discipline of not reacting. It's when you stop broadcasting and start building. It's when you stop talking about the vision and start doing the work. And yes, sometimes people will misunderstand it. They'll think you're unsure. They'll think you're losing. They'll think you have nothing going on. Let them. Because while they're guessing, you're preparing. The quiet moments where power is built. Silence looks like getting criticized and not jumping to defend yourself immediately. Walking away from an argument before you say something you'll regret. Hearing someone doubt you and choosing not to fight for their belief. Sitting with discomfort without needing to fill it with words. Keeping your plan private until it's real. It's not easy. Silence can feel like holding your breath. Your ego wants to speak. Your pride wants to correct people. Your emotions want to explode. But restraint is a muscle. And every time you choose silence instead of reaction, you strengthen it. You become harder to manipulate. You become less predictable. You become more dangerous, not in a harmful way but in a powerful way. Because you're no longer moved by noise. When results speak, they speak louder than words. There's a kind of peace that comes from letting results speak. It's the moment you stop trying to convince people that you're capable, and you just become capable. You stop telling people what you're doing. You stop announcing your growth. You stop explaining your boundaries. You simply live them. And slowly the world adjusts. Some people respect it. Some people get uncomfortable. Some people fall away. That's okay. Because silence doesn't beg. Silence doesn't chase. Silence doesn't negotiate with doubt. Silence positions you. The real reason silence feels so strong. Silence feels strong because it's rare. Most people can't sit in it. They talk because they're anxious. They explain because they want control. They overshare because they want connection. They react because they don't know how to pause. Silence requires something deeper. Self-trust. The belief that you don't need to be understood by everyone to be powerful. The belief that you don't need to announce your next step for it to matter. The belief that you can move quietly and still win. That's why silence changes the way people treat you. Because it tells them, this person isn't easily pulled. This person doesn't need approval. This person is thinking before they speak. This person has something going on. And even if they don't know what it is, they feel it. People mistake silence for fear. In reality, silence is control. When you don't explain yourself, you stay flexible. You move faster. You think clearer. You don't owe the world a preview of your future. The strongest players never reveal their next move. They let the results speak. Silence is not hiding. Silence is positioning. Every meaningful transformation happens in isolation. Not the kind of isolation that looks dramatic in movies. Rain on the window, a sad song in the background, someone staring into the distance like they've been abandoned by the world. Real isolation is quieter than that. It's waking up when no one is watching. It's doing the work when no one cares. It's trying again after failing with no audience to impress and no one to explain yourself to. It's the invisible part of change. And most people don't talk about it because, honestly, it's not glamorous. There's no applause when you're learning. No cheers when you're failing. No recognition when you're starting over. You don't get a trophy for showing up to your own life. You just show up. And you do it anyway. That's exactly why it works. Because the part of you that only moves when it's admired isn't strength. It's performance. But the part of you that moves when no one is looking, that part becomes unbreakable. The quiet beginning. It usually starts with a moment that looks small from the outside. A late night. A bad conversation. A mirror you can't avoid. A tired feeling that doesn't go away even after sleep. Maybe it's not even one big thing. Maybe it's a slow build. 1,000 little disappointments. 1,000 tiny moments where you realize, I can't keep living like this. And you don't tell anyone at first. Not because you're secretive, but because you don't fully trust it yet. You've promised yourself things before. You've said, this time I'm serious, and then watched that seriousness fade when life got busy or hard or lonely. So this time you keep it inside. You don't announce it. You just begin. Quietly. No applause when you're learning. Learning feels humbling. It's not just gaining information. It's being confronted by what you don't know. It's realizing how many gaps you have. How many habits you built without thinking. How many mistakes you repeated because they were familiar. And in the beginning you're not good at it. You read the book and still struggle. You watch the video and still mess up. You try the new routine and still fall back into the old one. There are days when you feel like you're moving backward. And nobody claps for that. Nobody sends you messages like, proud of you for being confused today. Nobody applauds the awkward stage. They only celebrate the finished version. But the truth is, the awkward stage is the real work. It's where discipline is born. Because discipline doesn't start when you're confident. It starts when you're embarrassed. When you feel behind. When you want to quit because you don't look impressive. And you keep going anyway. No cheers when you're failing. Failure in private hits different. When you fail publicly, there's a strange kind of comfort in it sometimes. At least people see you trying. At least your effort is witnessed. But failing in isolation? Feels like shouting into an empty room. You mess up. You fall off. You break your streak. You lose your patience. You return to the habit you swore you were done with. And you sit there with it. No one to blame. No one to impress. No one to soften the truth. Just you and the reality of what happened. That's heavy. And yet, that heaviness is exactly what shapes you. Because private failure forces honesty. You can't hide behind excuses as easily. You can't post a motivational quote and pretend you're fine. You have to sit with yourself and ask the hard questions. Why did I break? What triggered it? What do I actually need right now? Am I building a life that supports change, or just a fantasy? That kind of self-awareness doesn't come from applause. It comes from quiet disappointment. And choosing to rise anyway. No recognition when you're starting over. Starting over feels like swallowing your pride. It feels like being at the beginning again even though you swore you'd be past this by now. And it's tempting to hide it. Because starting over can feel like admitting defeat. But real transformation isn't a straight line. It's loops. It's returns. It's rebuilding with better understanding. Sometimes you don't restart because you failed. You restart because you finally learned what doesn't work. And that's not weakness. That's wisdom. Still, no one praises the restart. People praise the finish. But the restart is where mental strength is built. Because restarting means you didn't give up. It means you looked at your life honestly and instead of pretending everything was fine, you said, okay, again. That again is powerful. That again is proof you're not done. And that's exactly why it works. This is the part most people miss. They think transformation needs attention, needs validation, needs an audience. But meaningful transformation doesn't thrive in noise. It thrives in quiet. Because when no one is watching, you're forced to answer one question. Do I still care if nobody praises me? And if the answer is yes, do you still show up when it's boring? When it's hard? When it's lonely? That's when it becomes real. That's when it stops being a mood and starts becoming a lifestyle. Private effort builds the foundation. Private effort builds discipline. Not the loud kind. Not the I'm so motivated kind. The kind that quietly says, I do it because I decided to. Discipline is waking up and doing the work even when you don't feel powerful. It's not exciting. It's steady. And steadiness changes lives. Skill. Skill only comes from repetition. And repetition is usually boring. It's the same motion again and again. The same practice again and again. The same routine again and again. People want skill without the dullness. But the dullness is the training ground. Skill is built in the part of the journey nobody posts. Mental strength. Mental strength comes from surviving the moment you almost quit. It comes from the day you wanted to stop but didn't. The day you cried and still showed up. The day you felt like nothing was changing but you kept moving anyway. That changes you. Not externally at first. Internally. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to believe you're capable. Not because things got easy, but because you stayed when they didn't. Public effort builds different things. Public effort can build ego. Because praise can become addictive. And when praise becomes the fuel, the work becomes fragile. You start doing things for approval, for comments, for validation. And when the praise disappears, your motivation disappears with it. Pressure. Because now you're not just changing. You're performing change. You feel like you can't have bad days. Can't slow down. Can't struggle openly. You start hiding the messy parts. And the messy parts are where growth actually happens. Distraction. Because attention pulls you outward. Instead of focusing on the work, you start focusing on how the work looks. You start thinking about the story you'll tell later instead of the discipline you need today. And the mind gets scattered. Transformation needs focus. Focus needs quiet. The invisible years. There's a stage in every real journey where you feel like you're building something in the dark. No one notices the change yet. Your friends still see you as the old version. Your family still expects the old habits. The world still treats you like you haven't grown. And that can hurt. Because part of you wants recognition. Part of you wants someone to say, I see you trying. But that's the test. Can you stay committed even when nobody validates your effort? Can you keep building even when the results are not visible yet? Because most people quit right there. Not because they can't do the work, but because it feels pointless when it's unseen. Yet the truth is, if it's not invisible first, it's usually not real. The foundation must be invisible. Think about a building. The part you admire is above ground. The glass, the height, the structure. But the real strength is underneath. The foundation doesn't get photographed. No one compliments it. No one stands there and says, wow, look at that concrete. But if the foundation is weak, the whole thing collapses, no matter how beautiful the top looks. your transformation is the same. If your foundation is built on attention, it won't hold weight later. Because life will test you. Stress will test you. Loss will test you. Loneliness will test you. Temptation will test you. And when those tests come, you won't rise to the level of your goals. You'll fall to the level of your foundation. So the foundation must be invisible. It must be built when no one is clapping. Because later, when people finally notice your growth, they'll call it overnight success. They'll say things like, "Wow, you changed so fast. You're so disciplined. You're so strong." And you'll know the truth. It wasn't fast. It was quiet. It was lonely. It was the same decision made 100 times when nobody saw it. The moment it clicks. And one day something shifts. Not dramatically. Not like fireworks. Just a moment where you catch yourself doing what you used to avoid. You wake up and you move without negotiating. You respond calmly where you used to react. You keep your promise where you used to break it. And you stop. You notice. And it hits you. It's working. Not because you became perfect, but because you became consistent. And consistency is what isolation gives you. Because in isolation you're not building an image. You're building identity. The quiet pride. There's a kind of pride that doesn't need an audience. It's not loud. It doesn't brag. It doesn't need to prove anything. It's the pride of knowing. I showed up when no one cared. I kept going when no one clapped. I rebuilt myself without needing permission. That pride is different. It doesn't inflate the ego. It stabilizes the soul. And once you taste that kind of pride, you stop needing the noise. Because you realize, the strongest version of you was built in private. And every meaningful transformation happens in isolation. No applause when you're learning. No cheers when you're failing. No recognition when you're starting over. And that's exactly why it works. Private effort builds discipline. Private effort builds skill. Private effort builds mental strength. Public effort often builds ego. It creates pressure. It invites distraction. So build quietly. Let the foundation be invisible. Because if the foundation isn't invisible, it won't hold weight later. And when the world finally sees what you became, they'll think it happened suddenly. But you'll know. It happened in silence. In isolation. In private. Where real change is born. The moment you stop explaining your plans, something changes. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. No one claps. No music swells in the background. It's quieter than that. It feels like a door closing gently inside your chest. Because for a long time, maybe longer than you want to admit, you were doing this thing where you talked too much about what you were going to do. Not because you were bragging, but because you were hoping. Hoping someone would say, "That's a great idea." Hoping someone would look at you with respect. Hoping you'd feel real the moment someone else believed you. So you explained. You explained your goals. You explained your process. You explained why it mattered. You explained why it would work. And every time you explained, you felt a small relief, like you'd placed the weight of your dream onto someone else's hands, just for a second. But it never lasted. Because approval is like sugar. It hits fast, then disappears. And when it disappears, you go back for more. You find yourself in conversations where you're half present, waiting for the right opening to talk about your plan again. You're not even listening fully. You're just rehearsing. Adjusting the story so it sounds more convincing. You start defending your vision before anyone attacks it. You start answering questions no one asked. You start speaking as if you're on trial. And slowly, without noticing, the dream starts to feel less like a direction, and more like a performance. That's the exhausting part. Not the work. The explaining. The moment you stop explaining your plans, something changes. You stop seeking approval. At first, it feels uncomfortable, almost like you're being rude. Like you're withholding something. Like you're walking away from the table before everyone agrees you deserve to. Because when you've been trained to be liked, silence feels dangerous. Silence makes you think, what if they misunderstand me? What if they think I'm not serious? What if they don't support me? But then you realize something. Most of the people you were explaining yourself to weren't even listening deeply. Not because they're bad people. Just because everyone is carrying their own worries, their own insecurities, their own private storms. Your plan was never going to become real because someone nodded at it. It was going to become real because you built it. So you stop chasing the nods. You stop trying to get people to see your vision before it exists. And it's not that you become cold. You just become focused. You stop defending your vision. This is the part no one warns you about. Explaining too much makes you fragile. Because the more you talk about your plans, the more you invite opinions into something that hasn't even formed yet. And opinions feel heavier than they should. Someone says, "That sounds risky," and suddenly your chest tightens. Someone says, "Are you sure that'll work?" And suddenly you're scrambling for proof. Someone laughs lightly, not even trying to hurt you, and the laugh follows you home like a shadow. Then you spend the night fighting doubts that weren't even yours until you borrowed them. You wake up exhausted, not from working, but from mentally defending yourself. So you stop. You stop offering your dream to people who don't know what to do with it. You stop taking your unfinished vision into rooms full of finished opinions. And something in you becomes sturdier, quieter. You stop wasting words. This is where it starts to feel like power. Because words are expensive. Not in money but in energy. Every time you explain, you spend emotional currency. Every time you defend, you spend focus. Every time you try to convince someone, you leak momentum. And what's worse, when you talk too much, you start confusing motion with progress. You feel productive because you've spoken about the thing. You feel brave because you've announced the thing. You feel like it's happening because you've described it vividly. But the truth is harsh and simple. Talking about it isn't building it. So you cut the noise. Not because you're trying to be mysterious, but because you're finally tired of being hungry for validation. You don't want applause anymore. You want results. Instead, you observe more. When you stop explaining your plans, you begin to notice how much time you spend trying to manage people's perception of you. You start noticing patterns. You notice who always has advice but never takes action. You notice who asks questions that drain you, not questions that help you. You notice who gets uncomfortable when you grow quieter, because your silence reminds them of their own inaction. You notice things you missed before because you were too busy speaking. An observation gives you clarity. You start seeing what's actually required. Not what sounds inspiring. Not what makes a good story. What's required. Act more. This is the real shift. Because when you stop announcing your intentions, you create space to execute them. No more rehearsals. No more, "I'm going to start soon." No more long explanations that end with nothing. You begin doing small things that no one sees. You write when nobody claps. You practice when nobody watches. You plan in silence. You make ugly drafts. You fix mistakes privately. You stop needing every step to be witnessed. And that changes the speed of your growth. Because growth loves privacy. When no one is watching, you can fail without shame. You can try again without defending your pride. You can rebuild without having to explain why the first version didn't work. And you begin to understand something that successful people rarely say out loud. The strongest progress is often invisible at first. Improve quietly. This part feels almost sacred. Quiet improvement has a different kind of dignity. It's not performative. It's not desperate. It's not trying to prove anything. It's just honest. You learn to keep your head down and your standards high. You learn to let your results introduce you. You learn to let time do what words cannot. And slowly, you become someone who doesn't need to talk about discipline, because your life starts showing it. People notice the shift before they understand it. That's the strangest part. Nobody comes up to you and says, "I see you've stopped explaining your plans." It happens in smaller ways. Someone asks, "So what are you working on these days?" And you smile and say, "Just building." And you mean it. Someone else says, "You've been quiet lately." Not accusing, just noticing. And you nod because you don't feel the need to narrate your transformation. Even your posture changes. You don't lean forward trying to be convincing. You don't speak too fast trying to hold attention. You become calmer, heavier, more grounded. And people feel that. They may not know why, but they feel it. Because energy speaks. You become unpredictable. Not in a chaotic way. In a powerful way. Before you were readable. People knew your next move because you announced it in advance. They knew your goals because you shared them repeatedly. They knew your intentions because you kept offering them up for discussion. You were transparent, but also exposed. Now you become harder to define. People can't track you the same way. They can't measure your growth by your words anymore. They have to wait for evidence. And that waiting creates tension. Not negative tension, just presence. They start paying closer attention. Because humans are wired to notice what they can't easily predict. When you stop explaining your plans, you stop giving people access to the blueprint. And in a world where everyone overshares everything, where everyone announces their next move before they've taken the first step, privacy becomes a kind of edge. Not because you're hiding. Because you're protecting momentum. And unpredictability is power. It doesn't mean being secretive for no reason. It doesn't mean playing games. It means you are no longer available for casual doubt. It means you are no longer inviting opinions into the earliest, most fragile stages of your work. It means you are no longer seeking permission to become who you're becoming. And this is where it gets real. When you stop explaining, you stop negotiating with yourself. That's what most people don't understand. All that explaining you were doing, it wasn't just for them. It was for you. It was you trying to talk yourself into courage. Trying to talk yourself out of fear. Trying to talk yourself into feeling ready. But readiness doesn't come from speaking. It comes from moving. So now you move first. You build quietly. You sharpen quietly. You fail quietly. You improve quietly. And one day, without announcement, you show up differently. Not louder. Not more aggressive. Just more solid. And people feel it immediately. They ask, "When did you start doing this?" And you almost laugh because you want to say, "I started when I stopped talking about it." But you don't say that. You just smile. Because you've learned something deeper than motivation. Power grows in silence. The moment you stop explaining your plans, something changes. You stop seeking approval. You stop defending your vision. You stop wasting words. Instead, you observe more. You act more. You improve quietly. People notice the shift before they understand it. You become unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. Not because it scares people, but because it reminds them. You are no longer asking. You are becoming. There is a reason results are louder than words. Not because words are useless. Words can inspire. Words can comfort. Words can open doors. But words can also be doubted. People can nod while secretly questioning you. They can smile and still not believe you. They can clap politely, then turn around and say, "We'll see." Words are easy to challenge. Results aren't. Results sit there like a fact. Solid. Quiet. Unarguable. And that's where this story begins. The season you stop explaining started with something small. A moment where you caught yourself mid-sentence, about to explain again. You were standing in a room with people you've known for a while. The kind of people who know your past, your mistakes, your almost moments. People who remember the old version of you so clearly that they can't imagine the new one. You had been talking about your plan. Not bragging. Just sharing. Trying to be understood. But you saw it. That look. The polite one. The good luck look. The sounds nice look. The "we'll see how long this lasts" look. And something in you tightened. Not anger. Not bitterness. Just a quiet realization. They don't need more words. They need proof. You went silent after that. Not because you were scared to speak, but because you were tired of being a person who had to convince. Tired of being the person who needed permission to grow. So you made a choice. You stopped explaining. And you started building. Moving in silence feels lonely at first. People talk about moving in silence like it's easy. Like it's a cool quote on a black background. But the truth is, it's uncomfortable. Because silence is where doubt gets loud. When you stop announcing your plans, there's no applause. No, "you got this." No encouragement from people who only support what they can already see. You go home after work or after a long day and it's just you and your effort. Just you and the quiet. You sit with questions you don't say out loud. What if I'm wrong? What if they were right about me? What if I'm wasting my time? And the hardest one. What if nobody notices, even if I win? That's the part people don't mention. Silence doesn't just hide your progress from others. It also removes the emotional comfort of being seen. So you learn to survive without applause. You learn to keep going with no audience. That's what makes it powerful. The work no one claps for. Your days changed. Not dramatically at first. Quietly. Earlier mornings. Later nights. Less scrolling. Less talking. You started keeping promises to yourself. The small ones that build identity. You finished what you started even when it was boring. You practiced when no one was watching. You studied when you didn't feel like it. You showed up when motivation wasn't there. It wasn't glamorous. It was repetition. It was discipline. It was choosing progress over comfort again and again, until it became a pattern. And slowly, something started happening inside you. You didn't feel the need to prove yourself in conversations anymore. Because you were proving yourself privately. To you. That changed everything. When people don't see your growth, they freeze you in time. While you were working quietly, the world stayed the same. People still saw you as who you used to be. And it hurt sometimes. Not because you needed their approval, but because you could feel the gap between who you were becoming and who they still thought you were. They'd bring up old stories. Old failures. That version of you who talked a lot, promised a lot, and delivered, sometimes. They didn't mean harm. Most of them didn't. They just didn't have updated information. People can only respect what they can understand. And if they can't see your growth, they assume it isn't happening. So they keep you in the last chapter they read. That's when you realize something else. If I keep explaining, I stay in their frame. But if you keep working, One day you won't need to update them. Life will. Critics get loud before they go quiet. There will always be critics. Some are obvious, people who openly doubt you. But the harder ones are quiet. The ones who support you with sarcasm. The ones who ask questions that are really disguised insults. So how's that thing going? You still doing that? When do you think you'll be done? You can hear what they're really saying. I don't think you can finish. I don't think you're consistent. I don't think you're special. And it would be so easy to fight back with words. To defend yourself. To list your effort. To explain your struggle. To show them how hard you've been working. But you didn't. You let them have their opinions. Because you were done trying to win arguments. You were trying to win results. And that's a different game. The public win. Then it happened. The moment you didn't announce. The moment you didn't predict. The moment you didn't hype. You just delivered. Maybe it was a launch. A promotion. A project that finally got noticed. A transformation people didn't expect. It showed up publicly where it couldn't be hidden or minimized. Like a scoreboard. Like a headline. Like a number. And suddenly, people saw what you had been building in silence. Not your struggle. Not your late nights. Not your private doubts. They saw the outcome. And outcomes changed the room. You didn't have to do anything dramatic. You didn't need a speech. Because results speak in a language everyone understands. When you win publicly after moving in silence, this is what happens. Critics go quiet. Not always immediately. Some try to pretend it's nothing. Some try to reduce it. But you can feel the shift. They stop joking about it. They stop asking those little questions. They stop speaking with that confident doubt. Because doubt needs room to breathe. And results suffocate it. Opinions disappear. That's the funny part. Everyone had an opinion when you were building. When you were becoming. When you were trying. But once the win is real, most opinions vanish. Because opinions are easy when there are no facts. Results are facts. Respect appears naturally. Not forced. Not begged for. Not demanded. It just arrives. In the way people speak to you now. In the way they listen. In the way they stop interrupting. Respect isn't something you can pull out of people with words. It's something results place in you. Quietly. Permanently. The power of not saying, I told you so. Here's what most people think. They imagine the victory moment as a chance to prove a point. They imagine the satisfaction of saying, I told you so. But the deeper truth is, you don't even want to say it anymore. Because when you win the right way, you don't need revenge. You don't need to rub it in. You don't need to make them feel small. You just look at the moment and you feel something calmer. Not pride. Because your success says it for you. And it says it without bitterness. It says it without noise. It says it without you having to be the kind of person who needs to humiliate others to feel validated. That's real growth. That's real power. Why results are louder than words. Words can be doubted. People can question your intentions. They can question your ability. They can question your consistency. But results can't be argued with. A result is a receipt. It's proof that you did the work, whether they believed in you or not. And once a result exists, it changes how every future word you speak is received. Before, when you spoke, people listen with doubt. Now, when you speak, they listen with memory. They remember what you did. They remember that you delivered. They remember that you moved quietly and still won loudly. So now your words carry weight, not because you talk more, but because you've proven yourself in silence. The permanent part. The most powerful part isn't the moment of winning. It's what happens after. Because success doesn't just silence critics in the moment. It changes your identity. You start walking differently. Not arrogantly. Just settled. You stop rushing to explain yourself. You stop needing people to understand your vision before you build it. You stop asking for permission. Because you've experienced something rare. The feeling of becoming someone through action. Not through talk. Not through promises. Through results. And once you've felt that, you can't go back to being loud with nothing to show. The quiet lesson. There is a reason results are louder than words. Words can be doubted. Results cannot. When you win publicly after moving in silence, critics go quiet. Opinions disappear. Respect appears naturally. You don't need to say, I told you so. Your success says it for you. And it says it permanently. Moving in silence requires emotional discipline. Not the kind that looks impressive from the outside. Not the kind people clap for. The kind that happens in ordinary moments, when you're alone with your thoughts, when nobody's watching, when the temptation to speak feels almost physical. Because you will want to talk. You'll want to tell someone what you're doing. You'll want to explain the plan, show the progress, hint at what's coming. not even out of arrogance. Sometimes it's excitement. Sometimes it's nervousness. Sometimes it's that deep human need to feel seen. And you will want recognition. You'll finish something hard, something that cost you late nights, quiet sacrifices, uncomfortable growth, and you'll want someone to notice. You'll want someone to say, "I knew you could do it," or "I'm proud of you," or even just, "That's impressive." You'll also want reassurance. You'll want to hear that you're not wasting your time, that your direction makes sense, that the risk is worth it, that you're not being foolish for trying. And that's the moment where silence becomes discipline. Because silence isn't just not speaking. Silence is choosing not to reach outward when your emotions are begging you to. It's choosing to sit with uncertainty without handing it to someone else to hold. It's choosing to let your progress be real before it becomes public. I learned this the hard way, not through some dramatic lesson but through a pattern I kept repeating. Every time I started something new, I told people too early. Not because I wanted attention in a loud way. It was subtler than that. It was a little message to the world, almost like a safety rope. If I say it out loud, it becomes real. If people know, I'll have to follow through. But there was a problem with that logic. When people know, they have opinions. They ask questions you don't have answers for yet. They offer advice that doesn't fit your situation. They get excited or doubtful, and either way it changes you. If they get excited, you feel pressure to perform. You feel like you can't struggle openly. You feel like you need results fast. And if they doubt you, if they tilt their head and say, "Really?" or "Are you sure?" something inside you tightens. Your confidence becomes something you have to defend. Your dream turns into a debate. You start explaining. And explaining is exhausting. You find yourself trying to convince people who were never meant to be convinced. You lay out your reasons, your strategy, your timeline. You overshare details that are still fragile. You speak with that nervous energy that says, "Please understand me." And when you do that, something quietly happens. You hand your power away. Because now your motivation isn't just yours. It's tangled up in their reaction, in their approval, in their validation, in whether they clap or nod or shrug. So you work, but you're not working from peace. You're working from noise. I remember one night, nothing special about it on paper. Just a regular evening after a long day. I was sitting on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over a message box. I had done something good that day. Not headline good, but personally good. I'd kept a promise to myself. I'd woken up earlier than usual. I'd followed through on something I normally avoided. I'd said no to a distraction that always pulled me in. And for the first time in a while, I felt that quiet, rare feeling of momentum. And immediately I wanted to share it. Not the whole story. Just enough. A post. A message. A small update to someone who would respond fast. Because I wanted the reward. Not the reward of the work. The deeper reward. I wanted the quick reward. The little hit of being acknowledged. The feeling of, yes, this matters. Yes, you're doing something. My thumb hovered. And I caught myself thinking something uncomfortable. If nobody knows, did it even happen? That thought scared me because it revealed a dependency I didn't want to admit. It showed me that I wasn't fully doing things for myself. I was doing things for the echo, for the response, for the reassurance that I was on the right path. And I realized, that's not confidence. That's anxiety wearing a nicer outfit. So I put the phone down. Not with some heroic feeling. Honestly, it felt like resisting a craving. Like telling yourself you don't need sugar when you're stressed. The impulse didn't disappear just because I noticed it. It stayed there pulsing. I wanted to talk. I wanted someone to say, "Good job." But I resisted. And in that resistance I felt something new. A small kind of strength. A private strength. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with applause. But it was real. That was the beginning of understanding something deeper. Peace is more valuable than praise. Praise is sweet, but it's unstable. It depends on other people's mood. Their availability. Their generosity. Their understanding. Sometimes it arrives, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels genuine, sometimes it feels empty. And sometimes it turns into expectation, where the same people who praised you yesterday start demanding more from you tomorrow. Peace is different. Peace doesn't rise and fall with reactions. Peace doesn't require anyone's permission. Peace is what you have when you're not performing. And moving in silence is how you protect that peace. Because silence creates space. And space is where self-trust grows. Self-trust doesn't come from hype. It doesn't come from telling everyone what you're going to do. Self-trust comes from doing it quietly, repeatedly, even when nobody notices, especially when nobody notices. The first few times you move in silence, it feels lonely. You'll have days where you want to scream, "Do you see how hard I'm trying?" Not because you need applause in a shallow way, but because effort is heavy when you carry it alone. You'll have moments where you feel uncertain and you crave reassurance like oxygen. You'll think, maybe I should ask someone. Maybe I should tell them what I'm working on. Maybe they'll remind me why I started. And sometimes that's healthy. Support matters. But there's a difference between seeking support and seeking validation. Support is someone helping you stay grounded. Validation is someone holding up your worth like a mirror, because you don't trust your own reflection. Moving in silence teaches you to tell the difference. It teaches you to sit with your own doubt without running from it. Because doubt will come. There will be mornings where motivation is gone and discipline feels like dragging yourself across the floor. There will be nights where you wonder if you're building something real or just distracting yourself with effort. There will be moments where you feel behind, unseen, unappreciated. And in those moments, talking feels like relief. Talking feels like opening a valve. But it's also a leak. Because the more you talk, the more you invite opinions into a process that is still forming. The more you explain, the more you start building your identity around being the person who's working on something, instead of being the person who actually finishes it. Silence keeps you honest. It forces you to face yourself. It strips away the performance. When nobody is clapping, you find out what you really believe. Do you still show up when no one is watching? Do you still push through when there's no recognition waiting at the end? Do you still keep the promise when it's only between you and you? That's where self-trust is built. And self-trust is a quiet kind of confidence that changes everything. Because once you trust yourself, you stop needing other people to constantly confirm you. You stop needing to announce every step. You stop needing to prove you're growing. You just grow. I remember noticing a shift after a few weeks of staying quiet. It wasn't like life suddenly became easier. The challenges were still there. The temptations didn't vanish. But I felt different inside. More settled. Like I wasn't reaching outward as much. Like my center of gravity had moved back into my own chest. I started to enjoy the privacy of progress. There's something powerful about knowing you're changing, and nobody can interfere with it because they don't even know it's happening. It's like building a foundation underground. Nobody sees the work. But when the structure rises later, it stands firm because the base was built in peace. And peace does something praise can't do. It protects your direction. Praise can inflate you too early. It can make you feel finished when you're just beginning. It can tempt you to chase the feeling instead of the outcome. It can make you adjust your path to keep the applause coming. Peace keeps you focused on what matters. It helps you move at the speed of real growth, not the speed of other people's expectations. Because growth is not always pretty. Sometimes it's repetitive. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's humbling. And if you invite too many eyes into that phase, you might start avoiding the messy parts. You might start choosing what looks good over what works. Silence gives you the freedom to be a beginner again. To struggle without shame. To make mistakes without feeling judged. To take your time. And that's emotional discipline. Not pretending you don't care what people think. But choosing not to let what they think control what you do. There's a moment, right in the middle of that discipline, where you start noticing something. Your need to talk begins to soften. Your craving for recognition starts to fade. Not because you don't enjoy it when it comes, but because you're no longer starving for it. You're feeding yourself. You're learning to rely on your own belief, not external applause. That sentence sounds simple, but living it is heavy at first. Because relying on your own belief means you have to become someone you can depend on. It means you don't get to blame other people for your inconsistency. It means you can't hide behind, "no one supported me," as an excuse. It means you take full responsibility for your follow-through. And that's intimidating. But it's also freeing. Because the moment you stop outsourcing your confidence, your life becomes quieter in the best way. Less explaining. Less proving. Less seeking permission. Just progress. One step. Then another. Then another. And slowly, self-trust forms, not as an idea but as a feeling. A steady feeling. Like knowing you can handle discomfort. Like knowing you can keep going even when it's boring. Like knowing you don't need to be seen to be real. This is why moving in silence is not about being secretive. It's about being stable. It's about protecting the early, fragile stages of your growth from noise. It's about letting your actions build your identity instead of letting your announcements do it. And yes, you will still want to talk sometimes. You will still feel that itch. You'll still have moments where you think, if I just tell someone, maybe I'll feel better. But you resist. Not because you're punishing yourself. Because you've learned something deeper. The peace you're building inside is too valuable to trade for a moment of praise. So you keep moving quietly. Not hiding. Not shrinking. Just working. Letting your results speak later when they're ready. And in the meantime, you build the one thing that lasts longer than applause. Trust in yourself. Because when you can rely on your own belief, you stop needing the world to constantly remind you who you are. You already know. And that quiet knowing, that is real power. The advantage of silence. By the time people notice you, you're already ahead. That's the part they don't understand. They think it happened overnight. They think you woke up one day with confidence in your voice and a calm look in your eyes, like you've always known what you were doing. They see the outcome, not the struggle. They see the confidence, not the doubt. They see the win, not the work. And you can't really blame them. People only notice what becomes visible. They notice the moment the results show up. They don't notice the months where nothing looked impressive. The months where you didn't have proof. Where you didn't even have certainty. They don't see the nights you sat in the quiet with your thoughts circling the same fear over and over. What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm wrong? What if everyone else is moving faster than me? They don't see the part where you almost talked yourself out of it. They just see you now. And they call it luck. Or timing. Or confidence. But you know the truth. You know how long it took to look this calm. When silence feels like falling behind. There was a time when silence felt like losing. You remember it clearly because it didn't just happen once. It happened repeatedly, in little moments that quietly chipped away at you. Meetings where other people spoke first, spoke loud, spoke long. Group chats where someone always had an opinion ready. Social circles where confidence looked like constant talking. And you were quiet. Not because you had nothing to say. Because you didn't want to say the wrong thing. Because you didn't want to be exposed. You'd sit there listening, watching. Your mind would race, making connections, noticing patterns, seeing what others missed, yet your mouth wouldn't move. And afterward you'd replay it. I should have said that. I should have spoken up. I should have shown them I'm capable. Silence can feel like invisibility. And invisibility can feel like weakness. So you started wondering if you were falling behind. Because when you look around, it feels like the people who are loud are winning. They're not necessarily smarter. They're not necessarily better. But they're visible. And in a world that mistakes visibility for value, quiet can feel dangerous. 2. The moment you stop trying to be seen. The shift didn't happen because you became fearless. It happened because you got tired. Tired of performing. Tired of trying to sound confident when you didn't feel it. Tired of explaining yourself to people who weren't even listening. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to prove you're enough. It drains you. Slowly. Then suddenly. One day you catch yourself talking just to fill space. You hear it in your own voice, how you're over-explaining, adding extra points, repeating yourself in different ways because you're hoping something will land. You're not speaking for clarity anymore. You're speaking for approval. And that's when something in you goes quiet. Not defeated quiet. Not sad quiet. A different kind. A calm, honest quiet. It's the quiet that asks, what am I actually doing? Because deep down you know this. Talking isn't the same thing as moving forward. And then you make a small decision that changes everything. You stop trying to be noticed. And you start trying to be effective. 3. What people don't see. Silence doesn't look impressive from the outside. From the outside, silence looks like nothing. But inside your life, silence was work. It was you showing up when no one was clapping. It was you practicing when no one was watching. It was you building something before it was ready to be seen. It's late nights where your phone is face down and the room is still, and it's just you and the thing you said you wanted. A notebook with messy pages. A laptop with drafts that never get posted. A plan that only you believe in. And it's not dramatic. That's what people also don't get. Real growth doesn't always feel inspiring. Sometimes it feels boring. It feels like repeating the same habit for the 100th time and wondering if it even matters. It feels like working without applause. It feels like watching others talk about their goals while you keep your head down and do yours. While others were talking, you were building. While others were explaining, you were executing. And some days the execution didn't look pretty. Some days you were slow. Some days you didn't feel motivated. Some days you doubted everything. But you still did something. You kept stacking small actions until they started to become a foundation. For doubt doesn't disappear, it just gets quieter. People assume confidence means you don't doubt yourself. That's not true. Confidence is not the absence of doubt. Confidence is what happens when doubt shows up, and you don't let it drive. You still had those moments. You'd wake up and feel heavy for no clear reason. You'd see someone else doing what you wanted to do and suddenly your mind would go cruel. They're better than me. They're faster than me. They're already there. And doubt would whisper. Maybe you're late. Maybe you missed your chance. But instead of reacting, instead of posting something desperate, instead of trying to prove yourself, you learn to sit with it. You learn to let the feeling pass like weather. You learn to say, okay, I hear you, but I'm still going to work. And that's the part nobody sees. They see the confidence, not the doubt. They see the calm, not the internal war. But you know how often you had to breathe through the urge to quit? How often you had to restart your own mind? 5. The temptation to announce your progress. There's a strange pressure in today's world. To show everything. To narrate everything. To prove you're doing something, constantly. It's like if you don't post it, it didn't happen. If you don't talk about it, it doesn't count. And sometimes that gets in your head. Sometimes you want to announce what you're working on not because you're proud but because you want reassurance. You want someone to say, wow, you're doing great. But you learn the cost of that. Because the moment you announce something too early, you start performing the identity instead of building the reality. You start protecting how it looks instead of improving what it is. You start chasing validation, and validation can become addictive. So you kept it quiet. Not out of secrecy. Out of seriousness. Because you weren't building a moment. You were building a life. And the life you wanted didn't require noise. It required consistency. 6. Quiet work changes the way you move. Over time, something begins to happen. Your brain stops craving attention. Your nervous system stops needing to be seen. You start moving differently. You stop rushing to respond. You stop arguing to prove you're right. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't matter. Because you're busy. Busy with the real work. And here's the thing about building quietly. It makes you dangerous in the best way. Because no one can compete with what they can't see. They're measuring your progress by your posts, your words, your visibility. But you're measuring your progress by results. By skill. By discipline. By the small habits that compound when nobody's watching. While others are still trying to look confident, you're learning how to be capable. And capability is quieter than confidence. But it lasts longer. 7. The day it finally shows. Then one day something shifts on the outside. Not because you suddenly became different, but because the work finally became visible. You speak in a meeting and people actually listen. Not because you said more. Because you said what mattered. You share something and it lands. Not because it's flashy. Because it's solid. You deliver a result and someone says, when did you get this good? And you almost laugh. Because when isn't a day. It's 100 quiet days. It's all the nights you kept going when nothing changed. It's the mornings you showed up tired. It's the moments you chose execution over explanation. But they weren't there for that. They weren't there for the doubt. They weren't there for the practice. They weren't there for the struggle. So it looks sudden. Success feels sudden to others. But to you it feels earned. And it does. It feels like something you paid for in time and effort and patience. 8. The strange loneliness of getting ahead. Here's something people don't talk about. Being ahead can feel lonely. Not because you think you're better. But because your life starts to move at a different rhythm. You can't relate to constant drama anymore. You can't relate to complaining with no action. You can't relate to talking without doing. And sometimes you miss your old self. The version of you who could waste time without guilt. Sometimes you miss being in the noise. But then you remember what the noise cost you. It cost you focus. It cost you peace. It cost you progress. Silence gave you your life back. Silence gave you your edge. 9. Why silence becomes an advantage. Silence is not just the absence of talking. It's the absence of distraction. It's the space where your mind finally has room to build something real. When you stop broadcasting, you start creating. When you stop explaining, you start executing. When you stop trying to convince people, you start becoming the kind of person who doesn't need convincing. And slowly your presence changes. You walk into rooms with less desperation. You speak with less urgency. You make decisions with less fear. Not because you're cold. Because you're rooted. Because you've proven something to yourself. And when you've proven something to yourself, you stop needing to prove it to everyone else. 10. The quiet confidence people notice too late. By the time people notice you, you're already ahead. They see the outcome, not the struggle. They see the confidence, not the doubt. They see the win, not the work. And that's the advantage of silence. While others were talking, you were building. While others were explaining, you were executing. And when the results finally show, people call it sudden. But you don't. Because you remember the quiet. You remember how it felt to doubt yourself and keep going anyway. You remember how it felt to be unseen and still commit to the work. You remember the nights your progress was invisible but real. Success feels sudden to others. But to you it feels earned. And that's the difference. They met the result. You lived the journey. And in the end, that journey didn't make you louder. It made you solid. It made you steady. It made you ahead. Before anyone even realized you had started. Below is a fully expanded, emotionally immersive story built directly from your script. The tone stays calm, grounded, and quietly powerful, with a natural voiceover rhythm, deep inner reflections, and a smooth, continuous flow. Nothing in the core message is changed, it's simply given space to breathe, mature, and land. Winning in silence. Here is the truth. And it isn't comfortable. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. That sentence alone can feel heavy when you first accept it. It goes against everything you were taught. Share your goals. Talk it out. Get feedback. Let people know what you're building. And sometimes that advice works. But other times, it costs you more than you realize. You don't notice it immediately. There's no dramatic moment where everything falls apart. Instead, it happens quietly, slowly, through small reactions, subtle doubts, and energy that drains without a clear reason. You start explaining your ideas too early. You share plans before they're strong enough to stand on their own. You invite opinions before you've built conviction. And suddenly, your vision feels smaller than it did when it lived only in your mind. When excitement turns into noise. At the beginning, your ideas feel fragile. Not weak, but young. They need time, space, protection. But excitement makes you talk. You tell someone close to you. They listen but not fully. They ask questions that don't align with where you're going. They point out risks before you've even decided if the path is worth it. It sounds hard. Are you sure now is the right time? Has anyone else done this successfully? They might mean well. Most people do. But doubt doesn't have to be loud to be destructive. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation planted in the wrong moment. You walk away feeling unsettled. Not because your vision was wrong, but because you let it be handled by someone who didn't know how to carry it. And that's when you start to understand something important. Not everyone is meant to see the blueprint. A vision is not a group project. It's personal. It's tied to your values, your pain, your hunger, your past failures, your quiet promises to yourself. When you hand it to someone who hasn't lived those moments, they can't see it the way you do. They see risk where you see purpose. They see uncertainty where you see direction. They see obstacles where you see growth. That doesn't make them wrong. It just means they don't deserve access yet. Not because they're bad people, but because timing matters. Some things need to be built before they can be explained. Protect your plans. There's a difference between secrecy and protection. Secrecy is driven by fear. Protection is driven by wisdom. Protecting your plans doesn't mean lying or hiding. It means choosing carefully who gets to hear them. It means understanding that not every mind is a safe place for your ideas to land. Plans are vulnerable in the early stages. They haven't been tested. They haven't survived pressure yet. They don't need opinions, they need structure. When you protect your plans, you allow them to grow without interference. You give yourself room to think, adjust, fail quietly, and try again. And most importantly, you stay focused. Protect your focus. Focus is fragile. Every conversation pulls it somewhere. Every explanation costs you energy. Every unnecessary debate chips away at momentum. When you talk too much about what you're going to do, you feel productive without actually moving. You confuse motion with progress. Words start replacing action. But when you stop explaining, something changes. You wake up clearer. You work longer without distraction. You make decisions faster. There's no pressure to perform for anyone else. No need to defend your choices. No external noise shaping your direction. Just you and the work. And that kind of focus is rare. Protect your energy. Energy isn't infinite. Every time you explain yourself, you spend it. Every time you defend your goals, you spend it. Every time you seek validation, you spend it. At first, it feels harmless. Conversations feel supportive. Feedback feels helpful. But slowly, you notice you're tired before the work even begins. That's when you realize, some conversations don't add clarity. They drain strength. Protecting your energy means knowing when to stay quiet. It means understanding that silence is not weakness, it's conservation. You don't owe everyone access to your inner world. Some things are meant to be carried alone, for a while. Move in silence. There is a unique kind of peace that comes from moving in silence. No announcements. No countdowns. No promises. Just work. You stop talking about what you're going to do and start doing it. Days stack quietly. Effort compounds without an audience. Progress becomes something you feel, not something you explain. There's no pressure to look successful. No fear of disappointing anyone. No need to rush results. You're no longer performing. You're building. And building takes time. Let action stack quietly. Small actions don't look impressive when you describe them. That's why people underestimate them. Waking up early one day doesn't change much. Showing up focused for 1 week doesn't turn heads. Being disciplined for a month goes unnoticed. But consistency doesn't need applause to work. Actions stack. Slowly. Invisibly. Like bricks laid one at a time when no one is watching. And one day what you've built is solid. Not because you talked about it, but because you didn't stop. Discipline matures in the dark. Discipline is quiet by nature. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask to be seen. It grows strongest when it's not being observed. When no one is checking in. When no one is praising your effort. When no one even knows you're working. That's when discipline becomes real. Because it's no longer tied to recognition. It's tied to identity. You do the work because that's who you are now. And that kind of discipline doesn't fade when motivation disappears. It stays. The loneliness of quiet progress. There will be moments when silence feels heavy. When you want to talk. When you want someone to see how hard you're trying. When you want reassurance that it's worth it. Those moments test you. But they also strengthen you. Because you learn how to validate yourself. How to trust your own judgment. How to keep going without external approval. And slowly you realize, this quiet season is shaping you just as much as the outcome will. When the time comes, there's a moment. You don't plan it but you feel it. When the work speaks for itself. It doesn't arrive with drama. It arrives with certainty. Results show up. Not flashy at first. Not loud. But undeniable. People notice changes before you say anything. They see progress they didn't expect. They ask questions you no longer need to answer. How did you do this? When did this happen? I didn't know you were working on this. And you smile. Because you were. Quietly. Let results speak. Results don't argue. They don't justify. They don't over-explain. They stand. And when results speak, they speak loudly without raising their voice. No long stories. No defensive explanations. No need to convince. The proof is visible. And suddenly, the same people who doubted now listen differently. Not because you proved them wrong, but because you never tried to prove anything at all. The freedom of no explanation. There is a deep kind of freedom in not explaining your journey. Not listing sacrifices. Not recounting sleepless nights. Not justifying why it took so long. You don't need to. Because the outcome carries the weight. And explanations would only cheapen it. Some things are meant to be understood only after they exist. The strongest statement. The strongest statement you can make isn't what you say. It's what you build. It's the quiet confidence of someone who trusted themselves enough to stay silent when necessary, and strong enough to keep going anyway. Winning without ever explaining how you got there isn't arrogance. It's discipline. It's patience. It's self-respect. A different kind of power. This kind of power doesn't come from being seen early. It comes from being ready when you are seen. It doesn't rush. It doesn't announce. It doesn't beg for belief. It arrives fully formed. And when it does, nothing needs to be said. The final truth. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. Protect your plans. Protect your focus. Protect your energy. Move in silence. Let your actions stack quietly. Let your discipline mature unseen. And when the time comes, let your results speak so loudly that explanations are no longer needed. Because the strongest statement you can make is this. Winning without ever explaining how you got there.